Smoke fills the air, the wrestlers roar. It's smoke beyond the mat, where legends go to war. From the ring to the mic, the stories unfold of triumphs and tears, tales yet untold. Smoke beyond the mat, where legends are born, where the passion burns bright and the spirit is torn. From the heart of the ring to the soul of the show, smoke beyond the mat, where the wrestlers go. Take the stage with wit and charm. They guide us through the chaos, keeping us warm. From old school icons to rising stars, they share their journeys, leaving lasting scars. Smoke beyond the mat, where legends are born, where the passion burns bright and the spirit is torn. From the heart of the the soul of the show, smoke beyond the mat, where the wrestlers go.
And of course, it's Smoke Beyond the Mat, and this episode, of course, is talking about the living legend Harley Race. But talking of living legends, of course, I'm joined by my co-host brother out of the old Florida Panhandle. We've got the grumpy cigar preacher, and I tell you one thing: if you're in the wrestling ring with him, he'd give you the crucifix power bomb. He would, and trust me, you wouldn't tap out of that wrestling move. And of course, if you go on the wrestling ring with me, instead of giving you the bear hug, it'd be the grizzly bear hug that I'd give you, and I'd make you tap out. Of course, you got me guys at Rocky.
Ginger grizzly bear hug.
Yeah, the ginger grizzly bear hug. But of course, you got me guys at Rocky Cigar.
Rocky
_ cigar _ N _ of course pipe _ reviewer, and then of course you got Grumpy at Grumpy _ cigar _ preacher 58, and of course my fellow cigar doing brother. But we're going to be talking about the living legend Harley Race, and of course, as you can see, got a couple of pictures there. So thank you very much, of course, to harleyrace.com on the internet, where we could find these pictures of the living legend. And I would just want to say thank you for letting me use them and stuff. But yeah, we're going to, of course, deep dive into the living legend. And I remember seeing Harley Race in WCW when he popped up as, of course, Big Van Vader's manager. And then, of course, watching a little bit later down the line and finding different wrestling tapes when I used to go and, of course, get the old VHSs, I found this, of course, he was King Harley Race, which was in WWF at the time, and seeing him with the bleached blonde hair, that different kind of rugged look, where in WCW, the suit, the mustache, the blonde hair combed back, different kind of guy. But from all the stories that we've heard, he was a legitimate tough guy, and you wouldn't want to piss him off because he would knock your teeth straight down your throat. That's the stories that are being told. But of course, Harley Race, and of course his name was Harley Leland Race, and he was born on April 11th, 1943. Sadly, of course, he passed away on August 1st, 2019, and passed away from lung cancer, which is a great shame. He was a professional wrestler, of course, a promoter, and a trainer. And Grump, of course, we know a couple of the federations, and I just mentioned two, of course, WCW and WWF, which is now WWE. But what other federations did he work in, my brother, and what other wrestling companies did he work for?
Let's see here. Let's see. He was recruited by St. Joseph Wrestling promoter Gus Carras, and Yeah, hired him to do odd jobs for promotion. You know, that was some of his early career stuff. Let's see. Moved to Nashville, began wrestling under a ring name of Jack Long.
Yep.
Formed a tag team with the storyline brother John Long, and they quickly captured Southern Tag Team Championship. Let's see.
Cool.
It didn't give a year with that, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it was pretty early. Uh,
Yeah, I should imagine it
then,
was.
yeah, it says he was seen as a rising star in the business until a car accident put him out of action and nearly a leg nearly being amputated.
Yeah, and
Yeah, and
that's
yeah,
crazy because
yeah,
as we know with him, of course, he's one of only 6 men to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, the NWA Hall of Fame, the WCW Hall of Fame, the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, and the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. He is widely considered as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. And when you think he was already in school, then he didn't do good in school. He had a big massive fight kicked off, of course. Race ended up getting kneed in the back of the head when, of course, his principal was trying to break up a fight. Enraged, of course, Race attacked his principal at the time, resulting in him getting kicked out of school. And
yeah,
around that, he got kicked out of school. He was 6 foot 1 inch and weighed 225 pounds. And then that's when, of course, Race decided from an early age he wanted to get into professional wrestling.
yep,
And he became a driver for Happy Humphrey. He was too large to drive at the time. And then, of course, as we know, he got to meet, of course, Gus Caravis within St. James Wrestling. And he was hired to do, of course, odd jobs. And then, of course, he was driving around for the 800-pound Happy Humphrey. And you think at the age of 18, he moved to Nashville. And that's when he started wrestling at 18 with Jack Long. And what a crazy time you think around that time as he got into it at 18. And just getting into that. And then, of course, that car accident where it nearly took him out. And he nearly had to have his leg taken off. Then his wife gets pregnant, which was Vivian Louise Jones, who died instantly. They had been married just over a month. Of course, Kravis heard about his employee's condition, went into the hospital, blocked the planning amputation, declared it over my dead body. In doing so, of course, he saved Race's leg. Although he recovered, doctors told Race he may never walk again and his wrestling career was over. But undaunted, Race, of course, endured grilling physical therapy for 7 months, made a full recovery, and then he went back to work, of course, for Jack and Tony Santos in the Boston territory at the Great Monteme in 1963. So, just around that time, 1963 alone, was a great time to be getting into professional wrestling and seeing these
yeah.
legitimate hard men like Harley Race, like Dusty, like Ric Flair and Tony, of course, and different ones that we've seen that were starting around the 60s, the 70s. But
But
what would have got what would have gone
what?
through your head though? What would have gone through your head though? First, Grant, before you say what you're going to say, my brother. What would have gone through your head having the start of a career as a wrestler? You have a car accident and told you're never going to wrestle again. You're going to have your leg taken. Then your first wife dies in childbirth. Eh, that must have really messed Harley Race's head up around that time. Why would you? I don't think I could have concentrated on anything to do with wrestling I only wanted to make sure I knew why my wife passed. There's I'm saving me leg. Jeez.
That uh, that right there will bring a man to make some serious decisions. You know, people all
Yep.
the time talking about, you got to make up your mind. Are you in or are you out?
Yep.
And with all that going on, a man can choose to sink deep into the drugs, the bottle, whatever other
Oh
mind
yeah.
relief they can think of, or they can choose to go the other way. You know, being the person I am, I've got to promote,
Yep.
going with the Lord because that's what straightened my life up and that's what's made the changes in my life. So,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
and that's how I see these situations. You come to that. So they say that at that crossroads, you got to make
Oh
up
yeah.
your mind. You gonna walk with the world, or you gonna walk the good way. And it's just a simple matter of choice. But I mean,
It's a shame.
Racer is
It's a
a
shame.
different
Oh yeah.
individual.
It's a shame. It's a shame. There's like you said there, Grump, about the crossroads, and either you walk the great happy life and do the right thing, or you walk the
Yeah,
devil side and you go down that devil lane. But going down the devil lane, of course, as we know, a lot of wrestlers aren't here today due to walking down that devil road. The
exactly.
big, the biggest shocker to me is overall dying and being told, of course, you're never going to wrestle again in 1963.
Yeah,
By 64,
yeah. Then
he's
came
he's he's
'64.
he's, he's back wrestling. Of course, for
Yeah.
Dory Funk, the Funk brothers, in
Who
Am-
else?
yeah,
I mean,
down in course in Amarillo,
Amarillo.
Texas territory.
Yeah,
Yeah, and of course this time he wrestled as Harley Race after his father told him that he should not work to make anyone's else's name famous. So Race never again used a different ring name. In Amarillo, of course, Race met fellow up and coming wrestler Larry Henring, later Larry, sorry, the
Larry
Axe
Hennig. Yeah,
Henning.
the
Yeah,
axe. Yeah.
and of course, he was the father of the late great Mr. Perfect, of course, Kurt Hennig, and another wrestler. As I've always said, Kurt Hennig, no matter what, as Mr. Perfect, even just as Kurt Hennig, that guy was such a professional in the ring as a manager, cutting promos and how to talk, even as a ring announcer, and how he was sitting at the
Yeah.
table and talking. He could push somebody. But of course, don't know if you've ever heard of the infamous, of course, aeroplane ride with Brock Lesnar, Mr. Perfect, and all the rest, Grump. But we will go down this route because Mr. Perfect and Brock Lesnar had a big, massive set too. And we'll go down that in a later show. But of course, Mr. Perfect's father, there's Harley Race met. And yeah, of course, they then started forming a tag team and moved, of course, to American Wrestling Association, which of course was AWA. And Harley Race did quite a couple of different years in there. So, of course, he was there in 1963 to 1971. Then he went back in 84, left in 86, which, of course, I was born that year. And then he went back in 1990. And in the AWA race, and Henning branded themselves as the Handsome Harley Race. And Harley, of course, which was actually a mockery given to him by fans in Japan, was handsome and pretty boy. So basically, of course, Harley Race became Handsome Harley Race. And then, of course, Henning became Pretty Boy, Larry Henry.
Yeah.
And they portrayed a cocky heel. So for anyone who doesn't know what a heel is, it's a villain, basically. So they were the villain, Bully Boys, tag team,
He was
and
a
of
bad guy.
course, yeah, they were known for breaking the rules to win
Dirty
matches.
dogs.
Yep, they became, of course, they
I have to
became
tell you
the
that
top.
story someday.
Oh yeah, they became, of course, the top contenders in January of 1965 to
Right.
defeat Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher, and sold out Minneapolis Auditorium to win the AWA Tag Team Championships. So you think straight away there, Grump. There's 63. He's told, "Yep, your wrestling career's over." 64, he comes back. 65, he's now the AWA Tag Team Champion with Larry Henry.
Yeah.
That's already a roller coaster of a start in professional wrestling and where, of course, he goes to. And geez.
I was just reading ahead. Sorry. It's funny.
Well, there's always that, my brother. One step ahead of me, of course, is always Grump. But yeah,
Short 2 weeks later.
what a what a
Yeah.
ride straight up there from 63, 64, 65 to now be a world tag team champion.
Yeah.
That's I think that's a good. We always say it's a good starting point for some wrestlers to either be a tag team champion and where it can lead, or sometimes they never get away from being the other person in a tag team, and their career never goes anywhere from just being a jobber, a tag team jobber.
Right.
Of course, as we know with Harley Race, it steps up, and of course, we'll go, of course, from there. So 2 weeks after winning the titles,
Yeah.
he was involved. He was involved in an altercation at the Chestnut Tree, of course, a restaurant in Minnesota. After Race confronted a man who was harassing a woman in the restaurant, knocking him unconscious, the man's friend, John Morton, stabbed a Race in the back, and Race, of course, was hospitalized, and Morton was arrested. Then, of course, Race and Henningwood decided to feud with Bruiser and Crusher again for the next several years, and were given 3 title reigns. Seven years of having the same kind of match. Jeez. Now, Grump, you get a match and you see two guys. You have one match and that's it. It's done.
Yeah.
Jeez. Where's the build up and the story? Because you think several years of storytelling of these guys hate one another. These guys want to absolutely kill one another in the ring. Geez,
Yeah.
7 years of a build. 7 years of a build up. You don't see that now, and you don't see that kind of storytelling. That storytelling's just gone through the window, hasn't it? In professional wrestling, to an extent.
Yeah. It's kind of microwave now. I mean, you've got this month, and it may go on a month or month and a half, but it's over, and the next biggest thing's moved in, and it's like let us put a bigger, shinier show out here to distract you from what you used to like. These guys had grudges for years.
Oh yeah,
And
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 that's the
some
same thing.
and people say it, but back then a lot of them guys really, they were really buddies, and they really had their dislikes, and
Yep,
they'd go into duking it out just quicker than anything, and you know we know today it's different. Let's just say
yeah,
that.
yeah. So, of course, Vin Gagne, which
Yeah,
another great wrestler, old Vin Gagne, of course, who
yeah,
owned
he was very good.
AWA, in particular, was promoted as the hated rival of the team, partnering with 7 other wrestlers in matches against Race and Henning during their AWA run. In October of 1967, Garnier was credited with breaking one of Henning's legs, thus giving him such needed time off from the ring. Race, as the storyline went, was also allowed to choose a new partner. and retain, of course, the AWA Tag Team Championships. Race's choice was Chris Markoff. Well, the duo was defeated in their first title events against the team of Pat O'Connor and Wilbur Snyder in November '67. The next several months, of course, Race teamed with Hard-Boiled Haggerty, I think, who was this year's presented, going with some of the greatest matches together. Of course, Race and Haggerty often were cast as Gagne and Cowboy Bill Watts. In March of 1968, after Henning's return to the ring, he and Race were back together, though the two never again won the AWA World Tag Team Championships. Despite the tag team success, Race left the AWA after 7 years. At the top of the division, in a pursuit of a singles career, started in the National Wrestling Alliance, which of course was the NWA.
Yeah.
And Race returned, of course, to AWA in 1984 to wrestle Kurt Hennig, which of course Larry Henning's son. And the confrontation was fueled by, of course, Kurt Hennig's dad, confronting his former tag team partner at the end of the match. Race also wrestled former wrestler, AWA World Heavyweight Champion, Rick Martel, of course, the model Rick Martel, as he was then to be known in WWF, as part of the Wrestling Rock in April of 1986. Toward the end of his running career, of course, he returned to the AWA, most notably cast against Larry Sabrisco, which another Hall of Famer, for AWA World Heavyweight Championship, and that was in August 1990, and was featured as the main event of the AWA broadcast on ESPN, making the final AWA television taping. The match ended in a double countout, and AWA folded after the match. But of course, that was his career in AWA. Now, of course, we know there's, after several years of him being in AWA, he went and left, of course, before he came back in the 90s, and he went to the National Wrestling Alliance. So, of course, he started in the National Wrestling Alliance in 1962, up until, of course, 1986. And Race jumped between, of course, the territories in the early 1970s, and he renewed his rivalry with Funk, of course, in Amarillo, Texas, and winning a regional title. He was seen as a gifted territory wrestler, not quite ready for the worldwide spotlight until 1973. Now, I find that hard to think, with all the history that he's had so far, 7 years of a run, a great run, to still not be classed as a big superstar, still classed as a lower tier superstar. That's crazy when you think of it, isn't it, Grump? There's a lower tier superstar that he was classed as, and still not a mainstream, when he's just had 7 years of a great run and everything that he's done. That's crazy.
That kind of alludes to the question that I've been waiting to ask here, and I was afraid you were going to run too far away, but you stumbled right back in there. Good job. Why do you say? It's an opinion. What's your opinion? Or back when Hennig, came back and they got together, it specifically says, but they never won the tag team championship again. Why do you think that was? What's your opinion of that?
I think of anything over that, it's probably the fact of putting the championship back on, of course, Henning, considering he's just had, of course, that time off with injury. He's now back, how much can we push this tag team if they got the titles? Where, of course, you got these other guys that have got the titles that are healthy. They've had no injury. You're going to put it on your golden goose that's okay and can run. You're not going to put it on an injured person that's just come back and then have them get injured again to then the titles be the way they were. And I think, if anything, you got to look. Henning was getting on in age. Race was starting to get on in a little bit of age. And I think that could have been another contributing factor, or it could have been the
Yeah,
fact
because
of
it said
it was
despite
fun
their
to watch.
success, he
Yep,
he flew the coop. Despite
yep,
they had great success, but they just weren't ever afforded the right
yep. Because that's
opportunity, or however you want to say
yeah,
it, that to ever regain the tag team championship. And in Race, like you said, right, Race finally just
yeah, up and left. But you got
go
to think. You got to
go pursue something. You know.
yeah, but you got to think as well, Grump. Right, as we know, if you've got the championship on you, it doesn't matter if you're tag team champion, uh, United States champion, intercontinental champion, world
Yeah,
heavyweight champion, or anything.
any
If you've
belt's a
got a
better
belt,
payday.
you're making the money. You're getting a better
Yeah,
payday than
yeah. Any
anyone.
belt's a better payday.
When they've got the belts, they've got this great payday. You
Yeah,
lose the belts, the money goes down. But you're selling out arena after arena after arena after arena for 7 years and don't get this belt. I know what I would have said, turned around and gone, screw you, I'm out. And I would have
yeah. I
left.
mean, that's
The same as Harley.
yeah. I mean, it. I can equate this to something that a lot of people could relate to,
Mm,
but in country music back in the period there.
yep.
Uh, if I was George Strait, man, I would wonder what was going on, because he deserved so many more awards through his period, But it was the big, there's another
Yep.
superstar came along, and that man right there, that's kind of the same way. How you have a run like that, you know,
Yep.
and come up short time after time.
Yep. Well, of course, we know there's in Kansas City, he did very little teaming with Roger the Nature Boy Kirby. Of course, just think there, Roger Nature Boy Kirby. I wonder who else copied that Nature Boy gimmick. Maybe Ric
Oh,
Flair. Hey ho.
that was a
But
couple of
of
those.
course, yeah, of course, as a singles wrestler, he held the NWA Minnesota Heavyweight Championship, as well as the Mid Atlantic version of the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship. He also started and would by many tours, of course, of Japan, and in All Japan Pro Wrestling, where he faced the Giant Baba. He worked, of course, with All Japan in 1973 up until 1989, and frequently wrestled for the Kansas City based Central States Wrestling. In 1973, of course, Race took the name Mad Dog and faced NWA Heavyweight Championship Dory Funk Jr., of course, in Kansas City. Race emerged from the battle as the new world champion, and which was predicted, of course, by fans as a stunning upset. Behind the scenes, Funk had pulled out of losing the title, of course, to Jack Briscoe, citing injury in a truck accident. In truth, Amarillo promoter, Dory Funk Sr. did not want his son losing the title to follow Babyface. And a fan favourite, of course, Babyface was your hero, of course, in
Mhm.
wrestling. Race, a known tough street fighter, was under orders from the NWA not to let Funk leave the ring as champion that night. The ending was a work, and Funk dropped the title in a third fall as planned, and TV announcer Bill Kirsten dropping the Mad Dog nickname during the match. So, of course, he wins the title, and he's now got that money again. And, of course, ending it with Dory Funk Jr. Of course, Dory Funk Sr. didn't want him losing the title, which it's always crazy when you think they don't want him to lose the title and they don't want this, but then they have to lose it. And of course, as we know in wrestling, it's predetermined, but this could have gone sideways. And with knowing this is a
Yeah.
legit street fighter, that could have got into some serious blows. There's, whoa, you think you're taking the title here?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? I'm now going to break your leg so you don't take this title. You either lose to me and give me the title, or we're going to have an altercation. I wouldn't have liked an altercation with Harley Race, let me put it that way. Oh,
Probably
but hey,
not. He's a
no
pretty big
chance.
dude.
Oh, yeah.
Just saying. He was a large, and speaking of those guys, back in the day, they weren't all muscles and cut and stuff like
Oh,
that.
no.
I mean, Race was just a big specimen of a man. He was
Yep.
large and thick and solid as a rock.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, that you didn't see all that. 8-pack on the stomach.
All the
Arm.
muscles and the guns. Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't see all that. I
No.
mean, there might have been a couple that we didn't notice because they weren't quite that cut, but Tony Atlas was probably the first,
Yeah. Tony
specimen that
Atlas.
I saw that actually looked like come from the gym, with big, and that was through the Georgia over in Atlanta,
Yep.
the one that was on
The Georgia.
Channel 7. I can't remember what it. Uh,
Yep. Georgia Championship Wrestling, of course.
yeah, Georgia Championship Wrestling with. Um, uh, yeah,
It's crazy because
Gordon
you
Soley.
think,
Yeah,
you think, of course, the wrestlers like Harley and different things. You just mentioned we didn't see
yeah,
six packs. They were built
no,
like a brick, basically stocky build. They got muscle, but they'd also got a little bit of a beer belly, as we would say. They got that
yeah.
stockiness to them.
Rhodes had
And
no build. I
no,
mean,
Rhodes had
Rhodes
no
was
build.
just big and thick.
Yeah, but look at Ric Flair when Ric Flair started. He was a big, solid dude, and then after his airplane crash, that's when he changed. He got leaner and meaner. Of course, he got the flowing blonde hair and the jet set limousine stealing, thieving, rolling, yeah, whatever. Yeah, of course, old Ricky Flair. So
Let
of
let
course,
me see how flamboyant I can be. Uh,
yeah,
he went through a period. I mean, Flair was always Flair, but I mean,
yeah,
Lord,
oh yeah, yeah. But of course, we know with Harley Race, there's time was only a certain essence with that championship,
yeah,
of course,
yeah,
and eventually, of course, he had to regain, of course, the championship again, often moving forward between territories. Oh, sorry, no. He had a title defense, sorry. And it was his first title defense. Held in Calgary, of course, against Klondike Bill. Aired on the main event of an episode of the promotion's Stampede Wrestling program. A Race successfully defended the title. Of course, resurfacing during the 21st of course, century as part of the WWE video library. Most of his television matches of the era were squash matches. So basically, he would wrestle people, he'd squash them, and of course, he'd win. Though tough Reese was, he held the title for only a few months, and then, of course, he lost it to Briscoe. In Houston, Texas, in July, he became, of course, the worldwide superstar and championship contender. Then, of course, Race was determined to eventually regain the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. He often moved, of course, between the territories, collecting several regional titles, including 8 Central States Heavyweight Championships, 7 Minnesota, of course, Heavyweight Championships, the Georgia Heavyweight Championship, the Stampede North American Heavyweight Championship in Canada, and of course, Stampede Wrestling being under the Hart family, Stu Hart. Then, of course, the Japan-based NWA United States Heavyweight Championship. Then, of course, the PWF World Heavyweight Championship, and became the first holder of the Mid-Atlantic United States Heavyweight Championship, still defended to this day now, of course, is the WWE United States Championship. This kept Race, of course, in contention for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and Race vowed that he would only need one chance against the champion to regain it. So, of course, that's some bold words to say. I need one match and I'll regain that title. So what do you think? What do you think there, Grump? If bouncing around in the different, of course, titles that he won, he's still gaining all these titles. And this is way before he makes the move of becoming a promoter, way before he makes the move of the big leagues, of course, WWF. Then, of course, the smaller league of WCW is always classed as the smaller league until, of course, the Monday Night Wars later on down the generations. But to me, he's already made himself a great superstar and a great champion with what he's been winning here. And no wonder he's become a Hall of Famer. But what's your take on this with, of course, bouncing around, getting all these different championships? What's your take on that?
Well, it shows me that he was definitely not going to give up on what he saw in his future. I mean, he continued to move where, he felt he needed to move. And when he felt he needed to move, he stayed relevant. I mean, I don't recall, once he was out there, I don't recall him taking any big hiatus where he would disappear for months at a time or anything like that. He might not be in this district, this month, but he'd be over in Georgia, doing his thing over there, and then he'd be in Missouri doing his thing out there. He didn't sit and get stale. He stayed active. He stayed motivated, and he had a goal. And he didn't give up on pursuing. Yeah.
Yeah, constantly moving. Of course.
Yeah, and he finally got his wish.
Yep, finally got his wish in 1977.
Yeah.
When he faced a familiar rival, being of course Terry Funk. What a wrestler Terry Funk is!
Oh man, he was always one of my favorites to watch. Man.
Yeah, he was on a different level. And
yeah.
Of course, he become the champion since the previous encounters Funk had in Toronto. Race won the title by submission with the Indian Deathlock, a rarely used submission move that put great pressure on Funk's injured leg. Of course, the NWA World Heavyweight Champion once again, Race this time established dominance in defending the title up to 6 times a week. Jeez. And holding it for almost 5 years. So 5 years as a champion, defending 6 days a week. And this was excluding extremely short reigns by, of course, Tommy Rich, Dusty Rhodes, Giant Bobby. Race feuded with many of the legends of the NWA, including, of course, Dory Funk, Dusty Rhodes, Dick the Bruiser, Pat Patterson.
Yeah, there's your name.
Yeah, Angelo Poffo, another name, and of course, Angelo Poffo.
From the Poffo family.
Yep, and of course, the biggest name in one of the Poffo family, of course, Macho Man Randy Savage, and then, of course, Lenny Poffo, his other son, which became, of course, the Brainiac in there and stuff, and
Yeah.
he was in there. In 1978, and he had a series of violent matches throughout the Midwest with the Sheik. And basically, it was a bloody 2-4 with a nail in it match in front of 12,313 at the Cobo Hall. The NWA and AWA and WWF were on good terms, and Race engaged the title versus title matches with WWF heavyweight champion superstar Billy Graham, who we spoke about last week,
Look at that.
and Bob Backlund, as well as the AWA World Heavyweight Champion Nick Bowwinkle. Race toured extensively all over the country and the world, including Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, many stints in Japan, where he was already well known for his visits, of course, with Larry Henry. And on October 13th, 1978, Race body slammed Andre the Giant, and Race would repeat the feat on January 7th, 1979, though it was outside the ring during a match. I think, if anything, there was only maybe Race and Hulk Hogan that were only known to have body slammed Andre the Giant. But when you think he had that big massive feud in Midwest with the Sheik, then of course it was in a bloody 2-4 with a nail in it match in front of all that, then the NWA, AWA, WWF, all on these good terms before, of course, Vince McMahon decided he's going to buy all the territories. Race engaged in title versus title matches with superstar, of course, Bob Backlund, Nick Bowwinkle, and so forth. And he's having these caliber after caliber after caliber matches with some of the big names of NWA, AWA, WWF, and he's having these big matches. That puts this guy now on this next level, of course. And as we know, the Race, after many victories over Dusty Rhodes and other great wrestlers, he lost the title to Rhodes in 1981. And then Rhodes lost the title, of course, to an up-and-coming superstar, Nature Boy Ric Flair. Though Flair was able to, of course, Race was able to defeat Flair in St. Louis in 1983 for his 7th reign as champion, which the NWA recognized as breaking the record previously held by Lou Bessie, which followed was one of the classic angles of 1980, which led to the first NWA Starrcade event. And Starrcade, of course, became a big, massive event through NWA, and then, of course, WCW, where, of course, Dusty Rhodes took the Starrcade thing. Determined not to lose the title again, Race offered a $25,000 bounty to anyone who could eliminate Flair from the NWA.
Yeah.
Cowboy Bob Orton Jr., of course, Randy Orton's father, and Dick Slater attacked Flair, inflicting what appeared to be a career-ending neck injury, and collecting the bounty from Race after Flair announced his retirement. Flair's retirement was a ruse, however, and he eventually returned to action. Much to Race's surprise, the NWA officials set up a championship match to be titled Starrcade, a Flair for the gold. The match would be held in Flair's hometown, of course, in Greensboro, North Carolina, not North Charlotte, North Carolina, which enraged Race. And I'm thinking of Charlotte. Charlotte's bloody Ric Flair's bloody daughter. of course. But shortly after the event, rival, of course, promoter, WWF promoter, being Vince McMahon, offered Race 250,000 to no-show the event. And of course, after considering the offer to sabotage the event, Race declined and the match went ahead. Race, of course, lost the title to Flair in the bloody, memorable, of course, Starcade Steel Cage match. With, of course, a special ref being Gene Kinski. Flair jumped on top of Race from the top rope and pinned him to become the champion. So you think there he's now wrestling Ric Flair, another legend. Of course, Flair has been offered this money to, well, the guys have been offered the money, of course, to injure Flair, like Bob Orton and different ones. Flair, of course, a Roos set up for Starcade being a big, massive thing. Now, let me ask you, Grump, if someone had come to you and said, I'll pay you 250,000 to not show up at an event, would you take the money?
Probably not. I mean, you know, if you're holding the title
Yeah.
and you're going to get bought off, I mean, so he went, turned that down, he went and lost it
Yeah.
to Flair. So, you know, either way, I just, no, I, I would have done the same thing. I mean, of course, that
Yeah.
was probably a known fact. You take this or lose the title, whichever. You know,
Yeah.
that was probably the actual ultimatum that, you know, the
Do
part
you
that
think?
didn't get leaked out.
Yeah.
You got
Do you think
options:
that could have?
take this or lose.
Yeah. Do you think that could have ruined him though for maybe, of course, his next move into WWF at the time? Because as we know, he went to WWF,
Yeah,
and this is where his career takes kind of a turn from
it
being
does.
the handsome Harley Race to being this tough guy Harley Race, as we know, NWA champion, of course, AWA champion, and all these championships that he wins to now move, of course, to WWF. He's just been offered this money and he's gone. Nah, not bothered. Of course, we
Yeah,
know we
that's
know
something
he
a little
regained.
different. Yeah,
Yeah, we know, of course, he regained the championship for a 2-day reign in New Zealand in '84, and after many years, of course, is now recognised as a title change with Harley as the eight-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion. However, he's lost to Flair in
but
Starcade, who's largely seen as a torch passing between Race and Flair. And of course, Flair has gone on to, of course, credit Race for igniting his career. And of course, Race left the NWA when they had a new president and was losing, of course, his capabilities. So it's crazy that he now leaves. We now don't see, of course, Harley until May 1986, where, of course, he was in talks with his longtime friend, who was also a manager, of course, very great legend, and we know he worked with the likes, of course, of Andre, King Haku, of course, different people, and that was Bobby the Brain Heenan. And he had to then, of course, go back. He had his normal brown hair, and now he bleaches it again. He bleaches it to blonde. He's billing himself again as handsome Harley Race, and he made his debut in, of course, May 31 in 1986 at Superstars of Wrestling taping in Toronto, Canada, and defeated, of course, SD Jones. Race was undefeated then that summer in competition against George Wells, Lenny Poffo, of course, who we mentioned being Randy Savage's brother, of course, Cousin Luke, which was one of the sheep herders, and of course, Cousin Luke then became the Bushwhackers, and Tony Atlas, which of course Grumpy's already mentioned. Then, of course, during this time, this is where it gets fucking stupid as of career, to be honest. Why they ever fucking did it to Harley Race, I do not know. But during the time in WWE, of course, they didn't recognize his existence as a wrestler, basically, in other promotions. It was basically, now you're in WWF, this is what's going to happen. We're not going to recognize what you've done as a great champion or anything. We're going to give you this schoolboy mentality of, we're going to give you a gimmick. And WWF was known for gimmicks, of course. So they created, of course, the King of the Ring tournament in July 14th of 1986, which I was born July 11th, 1986. So only a couple of days before I was born around this time. And of course, I didn't see Harley Race become this. I saw the later videos, like I said at the start of the show, where he, of course, became the king.
You got a lot of laughs, trust me.
Yeah, so, of course, Race after the coronational ceremony, he then referred to himself, of course, as King Harley Race. Coming to the ring in a royal crown cape. And, of course, he ended up then having a feud with none other than Hacksaw Jim Duggan and different people and stuff, but we'll go more into that, of course. But what they would do, they make his opponents, of course, bow and kneel. And usually Heenan would assist the defeated opponent to bow and kneel by grabbing their hair and forcing them to bow before a Race. But the funny thing with this, with Harley Race becoming the king, his theme tune around that time got reused when Jerry the King Lawler started wrestling in WWF. And he would then go on to use the King of the Ring music that was created for Harley Race. And you think Lawler goes around saying he's the main king, but not in WWF, my friend. In WWF, the very first king was Harley Race. So, of course, after that, he had a notable feud with the Junkyard Dog, old JYD. And they had a match, of course, at none other than WrestleMania 3, in which Race clearly pinned Junkyard Dog after a belly-to-belly suplex. Junkyard Dog, of course, was retired to bow as Race as the winner. But after the bow, Race got up. Junkyard Dog, of course, attacked Race before leaving the King's cape to a standing ovation. Race would then, of course, start spending his time feuding with Hulk Hogan. So now he's feuding with the Moneymakers. So the Golden Goose, of course, Hulk Hogan. Then, of course, Jim Duggan during a television confrontation. Race's crown and robe through Race, later attacking Duggan and taking them back because Duggan had kidnapped him. The feud with Duggan was highlighted as an extended brawl in 1987 Slammy Awards. Then in early 1989, this is, of course, where his career kind of takes another sideline. So in 1989, he suffered an abdominal injury in a match against Hogan, in which he tried to hit Hogan prone on a table at ringside. With a swan diving headbutt, Hogan moved out the way, and Race, of course, impacted the table inwards. The metal edges forced its way into Race's abdomen, giving him a hernia. Race continued to work through the injury, of course, at WrestleMania again, which would be WrestleMania 4. Or, actually, no, sorry. It'd be WrestleMania. Yeah, either WrestleMania 4 or WrestleMania 4 on March of 27th, 1988. Where, of course, he participated in the event's Battle Royal. And Battle Royal, of course, you got to shock your opponents over the ring. Following the incident and during his recovery, the WWF, of course, ran an angle where they acknowledged his injury, and his manager Heenan would vow, of course, to crown a new king. Race was absent, of course, for 6 months around this time through this injury, and he finally returned on October 15th to defeat Brian Blair in, of course, Italy. He rejoined the Heenan family, of course, around that time, participating with Bobby Heenan's team at Survivor Series on October 3rd of 1988. Then on WWE Superstars, he defeated Jim Gorman. After the match, Race declared that he decided to regain the crown from Haku. And yeah, another
Yeah.
legit bad guy that we'll be talking about. And of course, complained that Bobby Heenan never visited him elsewhere. And then December 17th, 1988, at Philadelphia. Of course, Race defeated Danny Davis. After the victory, he got on the microphone, challenged Heenan to bring Haku to face him. The month's draw to a close, and Race began to face King Haku in short house matches, which of course are dark matches that were never televisioned. Despite Race's anger at his manager, Bobby Heenan came to the Royal Rumble match. Eventually, that of course came to TV taping and cheered for both Haku and the former King. And Haku was victorious, and Harley Race departed from the WWF. Then, of course, his post endeavours. So his post endeavours, of course, from 89 to 90, and there's been no. He was wrestling then again, and the World Wrestling Council, so the WCW in Puerto Rico. He went back to Stamford, of course, again. Not Stamford, sorry, Calgary for Stampede Wrestling. Then the NWA. He went back to All Japan, AWA. He defeated, of course, Miguel Perez Jr. for the WCW Caribbean Heavyweight Championship in 1990 in Puerto Rico. And this made, of course, his last title run, dropping it to Jose Gonzalez in March 4th after his appearance in AWA, where he briefly retained, of course, wrestling. Then, this is where he makes the next move, of course, to the lower leagues, as they would say, being WCW. And what do you think of that, Grump? Because I know we haven't got to go through much of WCW because he never really did much at WCW and different things. But from that career then in WWF, where he becomes the King Harley Race, compared to everything that he did before to now be here, do you think WWF killed Harley Race and killed his career as a legitimate bully boy wrestler and a great wrestler? There's now you're putting a gimmick on him and he's got to live up to a gimmick.
Yeah. Like I said, you should have been there. Man, and you can go back and look at the old stuff through that period of time, man. That, to me, that was just embarrassing. I wouldn't have done it. I mean, but yeah, I think that had a lot to do, with his downfall heading out. Because that was just making fun, making a mockery, and making him do it, of himself.
Yeah, I think
That's
this was a lot.
like
I think
no.
this was a lot. I think this was a lot with, of course, WWF around the time and different people. You've only got to look at what they did to Dusty Rhodes, putting him in the polka dot tights and different things, and how they changed a lot of wrestlers. But of course, Harley Race
Yeah,
would go to Championship Wrestling, and in 1990 up until 95, only spending 5 years, of course, he wrestled and he defeated, of course, a lot of different wrestlers. He teamed, of course, with Barry Windham. He teamed, of course, against Lex Luger and Sting, and Lex Luger and Sting were a tag team around that time. Race would continue to program, of course, with Rich, being Tommy Rich, of course, through the rest of the summer, as well as facing Brian Pillman, which, of course, was at the time wrestling as one of the Blondes with Stone Cold Steve Austin, or as we would know him then, Steve Williams, and Wendell Cooley, of course. In September, he received several United States Heavyweight Championship title shots against champion Lex Luger. In October, Race renewed his rivalry with the Junkyard Dog in 2 matches in the WCW house show circuit. And then, of course, in Missouri on December 7th, 1990, Race sustained a shoulder injury and will ultimately retire from active competition. So this guy was getting really injured around this time,
yeah,
and no wonder he had to take a step back. So of course, we didn't really see him then again for a year. And he returned, of course, in June 14th, 1991, back in Missouri, 1 year after retiring at the Great American Bash. Race returned in 1991 and, of course, was advertised then as a manager for Luger. And it sang as a manager, as he had as a wrestler, it mainly led to Luger to the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. So, of course, managing Luger gained the title. So Luger, of course, won the title with Race. Throughout the title reign, as well as acquiring the contract for Mr. Hughes and Alexander Young. So, of course, now he's not only managing Luger, he's managing two other wrestlers. Then in 1992, of course, we know he started managing then Big Van Vader, Super Invader, and Vinny Vegas. And they started, of course, having a short-lived stable. Then Vader, of course, defeated Sting for the World Championship in July 12th, 1992. Race's primary charge was then, of course, managing Vader, which he did, then carried on, of course, managing Vader. And don't get me wrong, it came then up, of course, to some really controversial shit. And, of course, during the management of Vader, Race was met with racial controversy. When Vader was feuding with WCW wrestler Ron Simmons, of course, who became the first African American champion at WCW. And in the promo, he went on to say, "When I was a world champion, I had a boy like you carry my bags," which, of course, was really racist. This was actually part of the. This was part, of course, as a booking strategy by Bill Watts, and we all know Bill Watts is an absolute prick when it comes to different things in wrestling. To build the support for Simmons, he would eventually, of course, make champion. The Willie veteran was popular among young WCW talent and developed close friendships, of course, with Mick Foley, Steve Austin, of course, going to be, of course, Stone Cold, Mick Foley, of course, becoming Mankind of things. Then, on June 9th, 1993, in TV tapings, of course, Race was managing the Colossus Kongs and different things. Then, of course, Race returned a final time on a trio of Florida house shows, and that was in 1993 in Florida and in Jacksonville, of course, as well in Florida. He sustained an injury. Vader, of course, to the face of Flair, when he sustained an injury by Vader to his face, Flair. His former rival would come out victorious on each occasion, and that would be the last wrestling matches of his career, of course, that he did. After losing the title at Starrcade in December 1993, Vader quickly became Race's sole stable member. As we know, he carried on after doing that. Continued to appear at Vader's side throughout the rest of the year. And as the early wrestling career had nearly derailed due to a car accident, another car accident occurred again for Harley Race in 1995, which forced Race out of the wrestling business altogether. Race required hip replacement surgery, which, along with injuries, accumulated after years in ring, preventing him from ever being a manager. Race would make a few independent appearances against Flair, but his inability to work was just too great, and Race would make one last appearance in WCW television in October 1993 as a ring announcer for Bret Hart versus Chris Benoit. And geez, what a story that is about Chris Benoit. And this was, of course, a tribute to Owen Hart, which, yeah, Owen Hart had, of course, died in the WWE wrestling ring, well, the WWF wrestling ring from a fall. Then, of course, we get later down the line of his career and different things. And, of course, he came back. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame, of course. And Randy Orton confronted Race and spat in his face. So Orton could then become, of course, the Legend Killer, which would then, of course, accumulate Randy Orton to facing, of course, The Undertaker around this time. And then in 2004, Race was recruited by the Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, so TNA, as a member of the NWA Championship Committee. Despite reportedly being an authority figure as a member of the committee, he never made any official decisions and only made the occasional on-screen appearance of the company. He stays still staying relevant. And then, of course, the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2007, ceremony on March 31st, 2007, Race and Dusty Rhodes were inducted into the Four Horsemen by, of course, Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. And then on August 8th, 2008, episode of Monday Night Raw, Race sat in the front row and was acknowledged by commentators Michael Cole, Joe the King Lawler, before the show and different things. And then, of course, he'd show up again in TNA in 2007. 2014, New Japan World Wrestling at the Tokyo Dome. He showed up. And, of course, that's really where his career as a wrestler stopped. So, coming up to that grump of where his career stopped, what do you think of that as a career then in WCW? Not an active wrestler. He was at the forefront and then became a manager of some big names. Then to have another car accident and then just show up as a face, basically. So look what we've got. That must have been very daunting for him. He's had this kind of major career to now no career. He's been a manager to now not being a manager. That must have had some serious impact on his head. Well, I would have thought it would. What do you reckon?
Well, I can't speak other than,
Yeah.
when you go back and just what we, just what you've covered through here. I mean, your body, man, I'm sure the body was pretty wore out,
Yeah.
and I don't know. It just seems like once even it seemed kind of a natural when he came out of the ring to go into the training, and then to the managing and stuff like that. Those seem to be like normal progressions for a
Yep.
lot of the names. And I think he recognized then. But of course, even in that role, there was still opportunity. He could mix it up a little bit and still stay a little active, and all that. But then after you got both hips, your hips replaced, you've got back surgery, stuff like that, and that's pretty much when he moved away. And
Yeah.
to me, that was a smart move because after all that, he didn't need to be out there exposing himself, to the
No.
possible physicalities, even if it was accidentally being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was
Yeah.
getting up in age. He's getting into physical body. Didn't need to be tossed around and slammed on concrete
I
floors.
know.
And, so I think he made some smart moves. Did it weigh on him? Probably because, Race, he probably never thought he would ever have to come out of it,
Yeah.
but life happens. So I'm sure
Yeah.
it weighed on his mind, but I think
Yeah.
he was smart enough to accept it. I'll say
Yeah.
that.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true there.
For
Well,
his physical and mental health. Yeah.
what we're gonna do, of course, we're gonna take a break, man, and then we'll be back. And then, of course, we'll go into about his promotional work, and then, of course, his personal life up until his tragic, of course, passing. And we'll be back in a minute. So we'll catch you in 2 minutes. See you in a minute.
Or
So, of
Heart of
course,
America.
we're back, and of course, me and Grumpy have just been talking. But we know, of course, he got into, of course, promoting, so Heart of American Sports Attractions. And Grump, what was the date? What was the dates on that, brother? That he was doing these dates, of course, for the Heart of American Sports
That was
Association Attractions.
1973 to 1986. That's when he was there. Uh, he became involved in the ownership side of wrestling, buying a
Yep.
portion of the Kansas City and later St. Louis territories known as Heart of America Sports Attractions.
And of course, he lost over 500,000 as the owner as
Yeah.
well. Despite the championship years being the end and wishing to retire from acting competition, he was forced to rely on continuing to wrestling to make a living, and that was all down, of course, to McMahon's invasion of Vine. Then, of course, from 1999 to 2019, of course, he had World League Wrestling, and that was for 7 years away from the business, working briefly in the process server before retiring with his wife in a small town in Missouri in 1999. Of course, he started that, and of course, he had many different names that were going to events. Like, of course, he was training students as well, so raising funds for local charities as well as fundraising for his students. Legends like Mick Foley, Terry Funk, Bret Hart, even different other wrestlers were showing up, making guest appearance. The WWL had a working arrangement, of course, with Japan's promotion, Pro Wrestling NOH, and had, of course, the star then, Tasaki, of course, a former heavyweight champion. He was credited for training Trevor Murdoch, who was well known as Trevor Rhodes, and an NOAH veteran, H. Steele. Of course, Superstar Steve, Brian Breaker, John Webb, Thomas, of course, Ciampa, and Tomosa Ciampa is basically still active to this day, of course, in WWE, and has been a tag team champion and everything. Of course, he relocated to Troy, Missouri. Along with relocating the Wrestling Academy and Promotions, Race also built the Race Wrestling Arena, where events were put on once a month. Of course, he had a very hard time, as we know. Of course, his first wife, Vivian Jones, she died. Of course, in 1960, she died 5 weeks after the wedding in the same car accident in which Race nearly lost his leg, and of course, she was pregnant at the time. Shortly after Vivian's death, Race got married again, of course, to Sandra Jones, who he's briefly mentioned in 2004, his autobiography, King of the Ring. The second marriage produced a daughter, so he had a daughter. The divorce ended. His third wife, of course, Yvonne, divorced him in the early 90s after 30 years of marriage together. They had a son, which of course was Justin. He was an amateur wrestler, but never participated in professional wrestling. His fourth wife, Beverly, was vice president of the Commerce Bank in Kansas City. They married in late 1995, and shortly after Race's career-ending car crash, she often travelled to Race until she died of pneumonia, and Race had 5 grandchildren. Race, of course, continued running his camp, which was, of course, World League Wrestling. He later moved, of course, the business to Troy, and, of course, still was training different people over the years, and Race would then continue to promote until his death whilst ill in a rehab. But his list of injuries, which is crazy when you think of what he had to go through alone with the injury list. And of course, over the years, he needed surgery to his neck, hip replacements, knee replacements, had 5 vertebrae in his back fused together due to the years of taking hard bumps. And then in May 2017, of course, he broke both legs at Fulton Zone. One in several places, he needed a blood transfusion during surgery. And of course, we lost him. And then illness and death, of course, on March 1st, 2019. Race's close friend, and also who he used to feud with, of course, Ric Flair, announced that Race was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. And on August 1st, 2019, it was revealed by his longtime friend then, of course, Dusty Rhodes, that Race had died of lung cancer at the age of 76. He was buried next to his parents and one brother, and that, of course, is along the Highway 1313 in Quietman, Missouri. And, of course, that was Harley Race, the living legend. There's gone through all that, having all the surgery, of course, breaking his legs, to then getting lung cancer and bang. Not very long for when he was diagnosed
No,
with it to when he died of it. Yeah.
no, not long at all.
76. But he's still a living legend to this day, Grump, when you think
Oh
of
yeah.
it, because the different documentaries that have been done, like on, of course, Vice, Docs Had the Rings about Harley Race, the different documentaries that WWE bring out with the different wrestlers and the different wrestling matches. Of course, you can still find Harley Race all over YouTube and different places. His name's still mentioned when different wrestlers who
Well, yeah. I
trained
mean,
underneath him are coming up. His name's never not forgotten. He's always there, isn't it? At the end of the day.
you really can't, if you do any kind of in-depth discussion of professional wrestling, you really can't avoid at some point ending up back at Harley
The
Race.
Harley. Yeah.
You'll always, you want to go back in the history of wrestling, you've got to go through him, you know, going right on back through history of professional wrestling. Got to go right on back through him, right on back behind him. He's got to be there. You're never going to forget that name in professional wrestling.
No, and
He's
this is the thing with
been
him.
a part of too many organizations.
Yeah,
You know,
and that's the thing. And even if you hear other wrestlers when they do different podcasts, of course, one recently, Undertaker. Undertaker was talking about the story of when he met Harley Race
well,
in
I love listening to
WWF.
his.
Yeah, and of course,
Yeah,
telling the story, there's Harley Race was sitting there with a cigarette, and he goes, "So, son, what's your finishing move?" Well, I did the Tombstone Pile Driver. Yep, and I'll kick out of that too. And
yeah,
that's the kind of guy that Harley Race was. As he would sit, he'd play dominoes, he'd have a drink, he'd smoke his cigarettes, but he was a nice guy to go to and ask about wrestling. But he also was that tough guy that he'd take no holds and he'd give it you.
yeah.
But of course, we've come to the end of our legend show on Harley Race. So next week, we're going to be going down Grumpy's territory of a wrestler. And we're going to be going down Kevin the Wild Man Sullivan. Oh, yeah. What a show that's going to be. Kevin Sullivan.
Oh yeah.
And how he changed stuff. And around that time, of course, as he was doing that, we had the Zodiac Killer in the States and different things. The Manson family. Holy moly, we had some crazy shit going around when Kevin Sullivan started painting his face and doing all these demonic things. So that's going to be next week's show, of course. We hope you've enjoyed this. And from me and my fellow co-brother, of course, as I always say on the Cigar podcast, stay smoky, stay blessed. Thank you, of course, for joining us again on Smoke Beyond the Mat, where we've been talking about Harley Race and Grump, of course. Let's lead us out with the show, my brother.
Hey, I love you. Jesus loves you. But if he's not driving the bus, pull over. You get out the driver's seat. Let him take the wheel. He drives better than we do. Catch me on the next one.
See you next week.
Smoke fills the air, the wrestlers roar. It's smoke beyond the mat, where legends go to war. From the ring to the mic, let the stories unfold of triumphs and tears, tales yet untold.